Again, if you're just joining us, we're going to give it just another half minute or so, make sure everybody has a chance to join. Uh, this is going to be our candidate filing webinar, so hopefully you are here to learn about how to file to be on the Portland City ballot. If you are interested in campaign finance or something else, we will not talk much about that today, but all of that information is available on our website. We'll provide some links for you to check out also. We'll give it just another 30 seconds or so. I see some people still joining. We want to make sure everybody gets a chance. All right, we're going to go ahead and dive in so we can make sure we have lots of time for questions at the end. The presentation portion of this definitely will not take the full hour, so we've reserved some time at the end for questions. But again, I want to welcome you all here for the candidate filing webinar for Portland City elections. This is a webinar that we are putting on to help candidates understand the process and the ins and outs of everything they need to do to get onto the Portland City ballot to run for office for either city council or auditor in this year. We're going to do some introductions. I'll start with my introduction. I have a colleague that's going to be helping me out with this presentation, so I will pass it off to her in just a moment. But I am James Eccles. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the city's elections education supervisor. So it basically means that I oversee Portland voter education and engagement and do webinars like this. So I get to talk to both voters and candidates like you. And we're working our best to try and educate all of you to make you feel really comfortable and confident about going through the process of, in this case, becoming a candidate, and in most other cases, making sure you can fill out your ballot properly. With that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Blanca to introduce herself and start the presentation off, and then I will jump back in for some content later. Blanca, it's all yours.
Thanks, James. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Blanca Gaitan Farfan, she, her pronouns. I'm the Elections and Community Education Analyst. I work closely with James on all things voter education and supporting with today's training as well. To get us started, just wanted to mention, as you may have noticed, today's session will be recorded. The recording will be posted on the City Elections website before filing opens, so you can reference this at a later time. A couple of additional things related to Zoom functions. The closed captioning is available. For the session portion regarding the question and answer time, we will be accepting questions utilizing the Q&A feature. We will try to get to all of your questions at the end of the content of the webinar. If we are not able to get to your question, you can feel free to reach out to us via email. And throughout the webinar, we will be putting various resources via links in the chat, which the first one to start us off with that is the candidate filing guide, which covers portions of the content that we will be talking about this, today in the session today. So next slide, please. Great. So thank you again for being with us here today. This agenda, brief overview of what we are using today's webinar for. We will start off with a brief introduction of Portland City elections and go over what is new for 2026. We will highlight some important dates, and then we will get into qualifications, methods of filing, and close out with helpful tips, key takeaways, and sharing some additional resources. So that's the main content portion of the webinar. And then following that, we will have the time for a question and answer. So throughout the presentation, feel free to use that feature. We have staff available to answer questions in the chat, and then we will also dedicate that additional time at the end. Next slide, please. So who is Portland City Elections? So Portland City Elections is a division of the City Auditor's Office. The City Auditor's Office ensures an open and accountable government. We oversee city elections, certify city candidates and ballot and measures to the ballot and certifies city election results. We also enforce city campaign finance and lobbying regulations, as well as conducting voter education. A big disclaimer that we want to give is that Portland City Elections is the only office that you file with to be on the ballot for a city position. City elections is separate from various other elections programs or jurisdictions, such as the small donor elections program, Multnomah County elections, and the Oregon Secretary of State Elections Division. So what we mean by that is filing with small donor elections to be a part of their program is not filing to be on the city ballot. Filing to appear in a voter's pamphlet statement with the county is not filing to be on the ballot. And filing to create a candidate committee with the Secretary of State is also not filing to be on the ballot. So we encourage you to learn about each of those entities and the respective trainings and deadlines that they have. Lastly, we are hosting this webinar to support you, potential candidates, incumbents, staff, volunteers on campaigns, and as well as anyone else from the public who wants to learn more about the candidate filing process. And our goal today is really to minimize any barriers that may arise as you're learning about and potentially filing to run for office, and just overall maximizing ballot access. Next slide, please. So we mentioned that there are some new things for 2026. So this slide gives a general overview of what those new things are. So filing fees, this year city councilor filing fee will be $250, and the auditor fee for filing is $500. Some filing deadlines to keep in mind that, and so in accordance with state law, incumbent candidates now have a separate filing deadline. Incumbents are those who are currently elected to the relevant office that they are seeking to run for. In this election cycle, that includes offices for city councilors in District 3 and District 4 or city auditor. So with that in mind, the last day to file for incumbents is August 18th, and the last day to file for non-incumbents is August 25th. An additional change that there is regarding the filing fee waiver process. Overall, the process itself is more streamlined to support you and anyone who's utilizing that option for filing. James will provide a little bit more information later on in today's session, and there is more information about overall the waiver fee process in the candidate guide as well. And lastly, the posting of information online. So new changes to state law require online posting of candidate information, such as the candidate name and the offices sought for each candidate. So that information will be posted onto the city elections website. And again, there's more information in the candidate guide as well. So next slide, please. And one more. Some important dates and deadlines to keep in mind. The last date to meet residency requirements is November 3rd, 2025. So to be a candidate, you must establish that you reside in the electoral district of the office that you are running for at least a year prior to this upcoming November 2026. So technically that deadline you should have met already. For keeping that in mind in terms of residency, for auditor, the relevant electoral district is City of Portland. And for city council seats, you must reside within the seats district boundary. And we will also go over the district boundaries if anyone needs a quick refresher on that. The first day to file is June 3rd, so that's coming up. And then the last day to file again for incumbents, August 18th, and non-incumbents, August 25th. The deadline for voters pamphlets is August 25th. And as a reminder, you want to file with the counties that you want to appear in. You may want to appear in multiple counties voters pamphlet statements. And the last day to withdraw is August 28th. And that deadline is the last day that you would submit your withdrawal and get a refund and not appear on the ballot. So that covers this slide, and I'll pass it off to James now to get more into everything else about candidate filing.
Great. Thank you so much, Blanca. So I'm going to move directly into the qualification requirements. I want to note one of those deadlines for your qualifications is residency requirement that Blanca mentioned, and that date has already passed. It's 1 year before. So hopefully, wherever it is that you're planning on running in, you have already established residency in that place. But going down these quickly, the first is simply being a U.S. citizen and being a resident of Oregon. The next is being a resident of the relevant voting district that you're in. This year, we have districts 3 and 4 running for city council and the auditor running. So that means you have to either be in one of those two districts, or if you're running for auditor, you can be anywhere within the Portland city limits. In just a moment, I'm going to show you a tool that is really useful for checking your address to seeing exactly where you are. It can both be useful for you checking and to provide to your voters to make sure that they know what district that they are voting in. Finally, or next, you have to be a registered voter in the relevant voting district. We really recommend that you make sure to get your registration updated. If you haven't looked at it in a while, make sure that that registration does have the current address and then it's updated. And you need to be registered in that district, not just living in it, but registered in that district as well. The last qualification is only going to be for auditors. It's a separate qualification, and that essentially means you have to be certified as one of these three things, either a public accountant, an internal auditor, or a management accountant auditor. So these are certifications, they're professional certifications. If you are running for office for auditor, hopefully you already know about these and you are already qualified in office. You also have to maintain those certifications, that qualification, throughout your time in your term in office as an auditor. Okay, now as I mentioned, I'm gonna pull the screen away here for just a second, and I'm gonna show you a tool that we use and we recommend people using. So now you'll see here, this is a website it's portlandmaps.com. Pretty simple to remember. You may have already heard of this tool. If you haven't, I highly recommend checking it out. This is a tool put together by the city that gives you tons of information based on an address that you put into it. So I'm going to go quickly. I'm not going to go over all of those tools because there's a lot of things within this, but I want to quickly go over how you can use this tool to sort of figure out where boundaries are and make sure you have the right residency requirements. So when you first arrive at this, you'll have a little note here about getting more support information. You can dismiss that note. And then you'll see the whole map of Portland. If you want, you can kind of play around and go there. But what I recommend is going up to this address option right up here, and you can put in whatever your home address is that you were running for office from. In this case, I'm going to put in the address for City Hall. So you'll notice as I start to put in information, you'll see it starts to autofill. So these are all addresses that are established addresses, so that can help you to figure out what address you're trying to look for. In this case, I'm going to put in 1221 Southwest 4th Avenue. I'm going to select that and click it. You'll recognize this outline is the outline of City Hall. This is the address of City Hall. Now, when you get this, it'll zoom in on that location. If you put in your house, you'll be your place of residence. It'll show that. And then there's a whole bunch of information that comes over here. There's a bunch of different menus and a bunch of information. It can be a little overwhelming. The thing we're looking for is right here, 6 options down, is the city council district. So in this case, City Hall is located in City Council District number 4. So if you happen to live in City Hall and you want to run for City Council, you would need to run for City Council District number 4. Now, the last thing I want to show you about this tool is that here, the City Council District is clickable. And if you are to click on it, you'll notice it loads up it changes the color and loads District 4. And if I go to zoom out, you can see that this actually shows you the boundaries of each of the districts. So you can use this tool to input that and then look and see if you want to figure out, exactly where one boundary ends and make sure, where do I need to go if I'm going to talk to voters and make sure that I'm only talking to voters that are in my district. This will show you those boundaries and you can make sure you're on the right side of that boundary. Okay? All right. And like I said, I recommend checking out the tool. It has lots of other useful information just for where you live in the city. Okay, you can go ahead and take the screen back and go back to our presentation. This will take just a second as they take it back over. And we have dropped that link into chat. It's pretty easy to remember, portlandmaps.com, but the link's there in chat just to make it as easy as possible for you. Okay, and we can jump to the next slide. So now we're going to go over the actual process for filing to be on the ballot. I want to reiterate, as Blanca mentioned, the only office that you can file to actually be on the ballot to run for city office is Portland City Elections, is our office. So you may have heard of small donor elections. It's the government funding office. So if you apply for that, they have a whole program to get funded by the government. You can learn all about that. Great program. It's situated in the city of Portland, but it is not part of our office, not part of the auditor's office. So you want to make sure these are the methods and the rules you need to follow if you want to get on the ballot. Okay. You're going to have two basic options here. I'm going to go over both of those in detail in just a second. But as a high level, the first is filing a declaration of candidacy and then filing a fee with that. So the fees that Blanca talked about earlier, we'll talk a bit more about those, but you have that fee. If you do go with this first option, we do also have a fee waiver process, which I'll come back to in just a minute. But that allows people that find that to be an economic barrier, they have a way to waive that fee. The second option, if you don't qualify for that fee waiver, but you still don't want to pay a fee, the second option to file is a nominating petition, which is pretty much just you're going to go out, you're going to get signatures from your voters, you hit that threshold, we approve all those signatures, and then you can go on the ballot that way without having to pay a fee. Okay, next slide. So now let's go into the first option, go into a little bit more detail. So that first option is declaration of candidacy. And basically there's two parts to this, two things that you need to do. The first is that you have to submit a candidate filing application. We call this form the AUD 120. So if you hear us reference that, that's what it's called. And you can file that either through an online portal, which we definitely recommend because it's very easy to just go through that portal and walk through. It'll check errors for you and make sure you're doing it correctly. Or we also have a PDF version that you can access on our website, download, and then enter the information that way. I'm going to go into detail on that AUD 120 in just a minute, so you can we'll go through each of the portions of that to help you out. But first, let's talk about the rest of the requirements for filing in this method. So the next is that you need to file the fee. You need to pay the filing fee. Or if you do not want to pay that fee and you qualify, you can file the fee waiver application. I do want to note that fee waiver application must be filed and approved prior to you filing the AUD 120. So just the temporal order of that is you got to do the fee waiver, and then once you're approved, you can do that filing application. The next thing is the fees. As we mentioned, these have changed this year since 2024. They have gone up. So auditor is $500 and city council for both District 3 and 4 is $250. And those are due, those must be paid and due before your filing is complete and you can be qualified to the ballot. There are several methods of payment, so we have a few different options. And when we get to that part of the form, I'll go over each of those options. But know that we try to make it as easy as we can for you. And then the last thing I want to say, as I mentioned, there's an option to file online. There's also an option to pay online. So you can do this whole thing online and it's quite easy. But if you do want to come in person to file, we do ask that you make an appointment prior to filing. So reach out to us via email. That email's at the end, but we can also put it into chat. Reach out, make an appointment to come into office. Our office appointment days are Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday during normal business hours. So just 9 to 5. It's like I said, it's easier to file online, but you can come in person if you feel like that would be more comfortable for you. Just let us know ahead of time. You don't want to have to wait around for somebody to figure out what you need. All right, next. So this is the candidate filing application form. It's about 7 pages in PDF format. The online version is the same process. It's going to look a little bit different because it's an online portal, but it's the same requirements. You're going through the same questions. So there's no difference there in how you file it. It just appears a little bit different. So we're going to go through each section of these that we find is important and cover sort of some tips and just make sure you fill in all the parts correctly. So let's go to the next one. So the first thing that you'll notice at the top of this is, you want to make sure the date's right. So you make sure you have the right form. This is for the upcoming election. And then it has an original or an amendment box. Now, when you first file for office, you should be marking this as original. It's your original filing for this year to be in office. That's not I have filed one of these sometime in the past in 24 or 22 or whatever. That is an original for the 26th candidate filing. But there's also an amendment box. So if you are coming in and you're filing this as a correction to an error, or you need to amend something on this form, make sure to mark that so that we know that there's already a filing on record and we don't create a whole new file for you. There's also a bunch of important information on here that can be useful. It has the days to file, some of those dates that Blanca mentioned. Throughout this form, there's some pretty useful information. So I highly recommend just kind of reading the whole form, making sure that you learn about it. There's not just important dates, but there's some campaign finance information and some other things that will be really useful to you as a candidate. The last thing in this section is simply the city office. We want to make sure we're putting you in the right box and putting you on the right ballot. So make sure to check that box, either auditor this year or council districts 3 or 4. And we can go to the next section. So on the bottom of that first page, then we see the information, the personal information for the candidate. So this at the top, you can see you filling in your name. This is just the name you're commonly known as. You can fill out that information. But right below that, I want to draw your attention to this is a box that is titled Name Should Appear on the Ballot as follows. So that's how you want the name to actually appear. So there, you may have a nickname that people know you as, or a shortened version of your name. An example might be, my name is James Eccles, but maybe some people know me as Jim, and I want people to know that nickname, that I'm the same guy. So I might add Jim in parentheses onto that name should appear as. I do want to note you cannot put titles or certifications in this box. So those will not appear on the ballot. So if you have a PhD and you're a doctor, congratulations. It's really impressive. However, the regulations don't allow that to be part of your name on the ballot. So don't put things like doctor. If you have, an MBA, don't put that certification in, things like that. It's just your name as you're known as, and then you can have nicknames or shortened versions in parentheses. Okay. It's also useful. It's very optional, but sometimes it can be really helpful to have the phonetic spelling, and that's the next box down. This isn't used by everybody. It's really up to you, but if you feel like that would be helpful to your voters, this is a form that's going to be available publicly, and people can see that. So it's really helpful for that information to be there. After that is the residence address. Again, this is a callback to you're required to reside in the voting district that you're running in, and you have to have been there since last November 3rd, 1 year prior to the election. So you put down the address that you're currently residing at. That's in that first box. And then you're going to check yes or no if you've resided there. If it's yes, you've been there since November, great, no problem, that's easy. But you might have moved. Now, if you've moved out of the district, then that means you won't meet the residency requirement. So if you move from, maybe across the river up north in Vancouver down into Portland Council District 3, and you did that in March, that means you didn't meet the residency requirements, so you're not going to be qualified to get on the ballot. However, maybe you did live in District 3 as of November 3rd, but maybe, about March, that time frame, your dream house became available just a few blocks down. Well, we don't want to stand in the way of anyone's dreams. So it's okay for you to move from one place within a district as long as you met those residency requirements and you maintained them all the way throughout. So on this form, if that's true, if you found your dream house and you moved within the same district, you just need to mark no on this and then mark the prior addresses so we can make sure when we go back and check this information that we know why the address might not have been true in November. Okay, next slide. The next thing you're going to see on here that's a requirement is your occupation and your occupational background. Now, both of these boxes are required to be filled in, but we understand that some people, this doesn't necessarily apply to all people that are being on the ballot. Being employed is certainly not a requirement to run for office, but you do need to put something in these boxes. So if you don't put anything in, there needs to either be not employed in that top box or a none or NA entered in that bottom box. Other than that, it's really the description of how you describe your occupation so that your voters and people can see kind of what your occupation currently is. Okay, next. There's also a requirement, state requirement that we have your educational background. So this information, you just fill it in just like the other, kind of fill in your name of the school, fill in all that information. There's that second box, you'll see educational background other. So if you have educational background that doesn't kind of fit into those top boxes, you can put information in that way. And there's an option for any of these. If you really are filling in a ton of information, you can attach a separate sheet to this AUD 120 if you want to fill out that information. These boxes can fit quite a bit of information, but it is an option if you feel like you're run out and you really want to make sure all the information gets out there and is on this sheet. The last box on here is also required prior governmental experience. Again, it's not required to have that experience to run for office, But if you don't have anything to put in this box, make sure you put either none or NA. If it's blank, then you haven't filled out the form properly. All right, next. Okay, the next form is the a few just informational things for us. So the first one, I mentioned the small donor elections program and talked a little bit about that. I want to reiterate again, that office, it's a great program, but it's outside of our office. It's not connected to the auditor's office. So that means we don't always have the information right away for that at our fingertips. So this is three boxes kind of let us know your intentions or your current involvement with that program so that we can make sure we're treating any information about you as a candidate correctly and that we can interact and work with that program properly. Below that is a similar idea, except instead of for small donor elections, it's for your filings with the Secretary of State's office. OrStar is a program. If you attended our campaign finance webinar, we talked a little bit about OrStar, but it's an online platform that's going to use to file your transactions for campaign finance reasons. If you are already registered on there, you can fill this out and give us that information. I will note, I'm not going to go into detail on state requirements and OrStar, but there is a deadline to make sure that you do get registered on OrStar by the time that a filing deadline happens. So you're going to want to follow up on that and make sure that you do what you need to do there. And there's exemptions for that and all sorts of things. A little bit of that information is on here, but you're really going to want to go directly to the Secretary of State's website and their campaign finance state manual to make sure that you get all that information. On this form, it's really just three boxes because there's three like big picture options available. So if you've already registered and you're on there, we kind of just want you to mark that first box and let us know the name that your committee is registered as on there. So maybe Friends of James might be what I registered mine as, something like that, so we can make sure to find you in OrStar easily. The next thing is one of those exemptions I talked about. I'm not going to go into detail on those, but know that if that's what you fall under, you can mark that second box. And if you're not registered, you can mark that last box. But note that it says that you're not currently registered, but that you will be filing your statement of organization because there is a requirement unless you meet that exemption. All right, next. So now we're going to get to the methods of filing on this form. This form is required for all methods of filing, but we want to make sure that we are properly treating the form based on the method you filed. So those first two boxes are that declaration of candidacy. The first box is if you're doing it just paying the fee and doing it in a standard way. The second box is if you are doing that fee waiver, make sure to mark that one. And then the last box is if you want to follow up the nominating petition, and I'll get a little bit more into detail on that in just a second. Okay, next. So on this section, it goes a little bit more into what you're paying here, what you're doing in each of one of these options. So the option at the top is that first one, just filing by declaration of candidacy and paying the fee normally. So mark that box if you've done that, and it's stating that you've paid it and that you understand that your filing is not complete until both this is filed and that fee has been filed and received. Okay. And then I said I'd get back to some of their payment options. That's right here on the screen. So you're going to mark the way in which you're paying for that when you submit this. The first option on there, like I said, online. You can do this entire process online, and it's very easy. So that online payment portal, there's a link there, and it's also written out a URL. You can go on there and just pay it entirely online. You can also mail a check. It has an address information for that on there. And then if you do want to come in person to pay, you're welcome to do that. Again, I want to stress, if you choose that last option and mark that box, please kind of separately, there's a email address on there. Please separately reach out to us, schedule an appointment so that we're ready for you and you come in, we can get you in and out and get all that paperwork filed properly. The next option is if you want to file by declaration of candidacy, but you want to have that fee waived. So there are going to be some requirements. I'm not going to go into all of the details for the fee waiver. The candidate guide has some more details, and our website talks about that process a little bit more. But there are some specific requirements you can meet to qualify for that fee waiver. If you do, you're welcome to file that. It means your entire fee would be waived if it's approved. As I said before, if you are going with this option, you need to file that fee waiver application form first before you fill out and file this candidate filing application. File the fee waiver first. It'll go through our process. It'll get approved. And then once it's approved, we'll notify you. And then you can file this form and you'll mark that box saying, I have already been approved and I filed that form. And this is the method by which I'm filing. This is one of many reasons that I'll cover here why we highly recommend filing as early as possible. My colleague talked about some deadlines at the end in August, but filing opens on June 3rd, and we really recommend you get in as early as possible. And if you're doing something like this, it's even more of a recommendation. Things like the fee waiver, it's going to take a little bit of extra time to process that before you do your application. So filing early is always the best recommendation. The last one is just marking the nominating petition. I'm going to go into nominating petition, that method in a second. Really here, I just want to highlight, there's a box right there at the beginning. If you are paying any number of your circulators, then you need to mark that box yes. And if you're not, you mark the box no. So that one of those boxes should be marked either way. But if you're paying anybody, you want to make sure to mark yes there. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So I want to talk very briefly about a program that you're going to want to look up more information about if you are interested. However, we do have an option that is relatively new to exempt your residence address. So if for any reason you don't have to prove that there's an issue with safety or there's a threat to you, it's really just it's wet. If you want to follow this route, you are welcome to. You can have your residence address redacted from this filing. So when we put this information up online, because this whole form is required to be put up online eventually, when that happens, your address will be on this. You saw in one of those very first boxes, it's required to have your address in there. If you don't want that address to show up publicly, then you need to go through this process. Now, you don't file this form with our office, you file it with the Secretary of State's office, but it has a link here to where you can go. You'll go through that whole process. As soon as that's filed, they pass it down to us. They let us know. We'll redact the information from any of your application that gets put up online, and then that won't show up. So what you're marking here is whether you will or will not be filing that. You may have already filed it, and that's okay. That would be that second box. You don't want it to show up and be publicly disclosed. If you're not planning to file it at all, then you want to mark that first box just so that we know that we're not going to be looking for that form to be coming down from the Secretary of State's office. The last thing I want to say about this is not removing all of your information from being online publicly or in any way. So this is a public record. So this means that when we post this in a normal means, we will redact that so they can't see the resident's address. However, if someone makes a public records request, it doesn't necessarily cover that. So then your address may appear if the form is made public to someone making a specific public records request. So know that you're going to want to look into the specifics of this. We've got the statutes in there that you can take a look at, but know that it's a tool. It's available to everybody, but it's not going to be completely all inclusive, and you just want to be aware of that. Okay, next slide. Okay, so that covers the AUD 120 in that form that you need to fill out. If you have questions about anything you saw in there or you've seen in the form that we didn't cover, please throw that in the Q&A, and we'll try to cover that either right away or at the end. But now I want to cover the other form of filing. This will go a little bit faster because part of it is something you've already covered. But there are 3 forms required for the nominating petition and 3 steps to go through this process. The first form is the exact form that we just got done talking about. So that candidate filing application or AUD 120, whichever method you're going by, you're going to need to fill out that same form and go through that process. It's just which box you're checking for the method of filing. The next 2 things are only going to be required in a nominating petition, and the first one is a candidate signature sheet. So this is a form you're going to submit to us. I'll talk about it in more detail in just a second, but it basically is what your proposed signature sheet is going to look like for what you're going to take out to have voters look at, read, and then sign their name saying, yep, this person should be on the ballot. The last thing is the petition submission form. I'll talk more about that in a second, but I want to highlight that this is just a form that you're going to submit anytime you actually get to the signatures that are going to happen in the third step. So now there are 3 steps involved in this. The first one is submitting the application, that AUD 120 we've been talking about, and a proposed signature sheet. So I'm going to cover that in a second, but it's basically going to be a form filled out saying this is what we propose all the information will be for what you're going to take out to get signatures on. That's the first step. That needs to get approved. That signature sheet needs to get approved prior to going to step 2. I really want to emphasize that. Step 2 is going to be circulating your approved signature sheets, but you cannot circulate those sheets and get signatures until your sheet has been approved. So you give us the proposed sheet. We will give you in writing that approval of that sheet, and then you can go out and collect signatures. Don't make the mistake of being like, well, I've submitted my application and I got an email saying it was received, so I'm going to get a head start and go out and do signatures. Make sure you wait until you have that approval on the actual signature sheets themselves. This is another reason why we highly stress that you should probably start the process as early as possible. This, you want to make sure you get all this approved. That's going to take a little bit of time, and then you can get out collecting signatures. It's going to take a little bit of time, and then when you get to this third step, it's going to take more time because the third step is filing those petition forms with us in person. So all of those signature sheets, they're going to be filled out with a bunch of signatures. You're going to bring that in person. You'll file that with that petition submission form. And then we're going to have to go through and make sure that those signatures are good. So we go through and we approve all the signatures. That again can take multiple weeks. So we want to make sure if you're going this route or you're going any route really, you should be doing it as early as possible. Don't wait until August 20th to start doing this process. Make sure to get in there as soon as possible. Okay. All right. We can go to the next slide and we'll talk a little bit more about each of these steps in person. Again, if you have any questions along the way, we're gonna cover some of that at the end. But if you have any questions about any of this that I'm covering, the Q&A feature is the best way. We have some subject matter experts on standby that can immediately answer your questions and make them known. And if you have a question, I guarantee 5 other people probably have the same question that you have. So don't hesitate. Dump those questions in there right away. Okay. Step 1 of the nominating petition. So first, you're going to submit that application. I'm not going to talk a bunch about that because I've already spent a bunch of time talking about that AUD 120, but that's that form. Then you're going to file your proposed signature sheet. Okay. This image is sort of the top part of that proposed signature sheet. Again, do not collect signatures until that form is approved. And we highly recommend that you keep a copy of the proposed signature sheet that you submit. So you're going to submit that to us. We're going to look at it, make sure everything is good, and we're going to approve it. But we're not going to send you back that. You're not going to just get back that approved form. Where basically we keep that on file. So you should make a copy of that sheet that you submit. So once it's approved, then you have something to make more copies of, and you can make all your sheets, send them out with your people that are going to canvass and your circulators, and they can go out and talk to people with a bunch of sheets. Okay. I'm going to cover a couple of things on this sheet that are required. The first thing you'll notice. These arrows are all these required sections. The first thing you'll notice is right at the top there is some circulators or no circulators for this petition are being paid. So just like in that AUD 120, you have to declare whether you're paying circulators. This is the same thing. If any circulators are being paid, then you need to mark that some circulators box. If none are, if nobody that is out doing this role is getting paid, then you can mark the no circulators. Okay. The next thing you'll notice off to the right is county. That's going to be filled in. For the most part, it's going to be Multnomah County, but the city of Portland does reside in 3 separate districts, Washington and Clackamas. And you need this form to be submitted for each one of those counties. So if your main form, most of your circulators are going to be Multnomah County, you need to submit one that has Multnomah County written in there. But if some of your voters reside over in Washington County and you want to also circulate for signatures out there, you need to have a second sheet for Washington County and have Washington County written in on that. And that's the one that goes out to Washington County, and the Multnomah one will be the one that circulates around Multnomah. So you might have up to 3 of these forms being submitted if you're going to circulate in all 3 counties. The rest of this is pretty straightforward. You're going to have the name of you as candidate, the office that you're running for, and the election. So this is the upcoming November 3rd, 2026 general election. And then the district or position number, and it should have the city. So this year it would simply be Portland City Auditor or Portland City Council District 4, Portland City Council District 3. Okay? All right, next slide. The next step in the nominating petition cycle is going to be step 2. So that's now that you have the approved form. I've stressed this a bunch, so I know that all of you experts will be ready for this. But once you have the approved signature sheet, go out and get your signatures. Now, every office in Portland has a minimum requirement of 500 signatures. So whether you're running for auditor or you're running for city council in District 3 or 4, you have to get 500 signatures minimum, and they have to be valid signatures for you to get on the ballot using a nominating petition. Okay. And those signatures, what it means by valid signature is it has to be a signature from a voter that is registered in your voting district. So that means two things. One, they have to be a registered voter, and they have to be a registered voter that resides in your district. So that's again that callback to that portlandmaps.com tool. That can be useful for making available if sometimes people really aren't sure. These city districts are pretty new. So oftentimes people are like, I don't know, I think I'm in District 3, but maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm in District 2. So that could be a good way to just have available to do a quick lookup if somebody isn't aware, because they need to be registered and they need to be registered in your district to sign that form. Okay. It's also a requirement. You need to check out the circulator training manual and make sure you are responsible, and anyone who's circulating for you is responsible for following all those rules and all that guidance. A link to that is available both in our candidate guide and on our website, but you definitely need to go through and make sure you're following state and city regulations when you're out there circulating. And then the final thing on this is just we recommend, this is just a recommendation, but we recommend collecting at least 20% over the threshold. So in Portland, the case in all signatures, in this case, that would be 600 signatures, just 20% over that 500. And this is because sometimes, you get out there and people, they'll just sign whatever you put in front of them. Or they tell you, yeah, oh yeah, I'm in District 3, but they were off by a few blocks and they're actually in District 1 or 2 or something. So even though you think that you've gotten 500 signatures, you're not always sure. You may not be confident that those are all valid signatures. So we recommend getting a little over that threshold so that if some of those end up not being valid, you still get to that threshold and you're there. Okay, let's move to step 3. Step 3 is the last step for nominating petitions, and that is you file all of those signature sheets in person at city elections. Now, this is the step that you can't do online. You need to come in and you need to do it in person and file the original signature sheets. So we have all those signatures. Again, because you're coming in person, you need to email city elections before to schedule an in-person appointment on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and we'll be happy to help you as soon as be much easier to help you if we know you're coming in. Then you're going to bring all those signature sheets with you. Bring in all of them. Don't just bring in however many you think you need to get qualified. Bring in all the ones that you have, and you'll bring in this petition submission form, or the SEL 338 is what it's called. Now, this form needs to be submitted each time that you file signatures. Now, what that means is you may get a whole bunch of signatures and you come in, and because you're smart and filing early, it's mid to late June, you're coming in with all your signatures, you file them all, we start the process of looking through, and then you find out maybe you came up a little bit short. That doesn't mean that you're completely out of luck, because you were smart, you filed early. It's only now maybe mid-July or late July. You still have almost a month to go back out, get more signatures using the approved form, and then come back in and file more signatures to make sure you get over that threshold. Every time you do that, you have to file a separate petition submission form. So each time that you file a chunk of signatures, you're going to have a separate form for that. Now, you may do it all in one go, and that's fine. But if you don't, you do have an option to come in and do it multiple times. All right. The last thing I'll say on this is do not have a complete filing, and you're not done until you have all the signatures have been submitted. So if you do decide to do them in 2 goes, or you just don't get over threshold in that first go, know that that's only a partial filing. It's not a complete filing until you come back and you have all 500 plus of those signatures filed with us. All right, let's go forward. So that's the 2 biggest processes, the 2 big methods, either by declaration of candidacy or by nominating petition. We're going to go over a few things here, just some tips and some helpful things to avoid. For that, you've probably heard my voice more than enough. So I'm going to pass it back over to my colleague Blanca to kind of cover some things some do's and do nots that will be helpful for you as a candidate. And then we'll come back to answer some questions.
Great. Yes, and we are almost at the end of the content here. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to use that Q&A feature and drop those there. Some just tips to avoid making mistakes and helping out yourself and your campaign. So don't wait to file. Again, file early. Filing opens June 3rd. We encourage you to get up to speed on campaign finance regulations. So reviewing the campaign finance webinar and the campaign finance guide. Double check your voting district. So using that tool that James mentioned, the Portland Maps tool, to familiarize yourself with the district you intend to run in, as well as if you're collecting those signatures so that you know the voters that you should connect with. Updating your registration before filing, so making sure that your voter registration is up to date. If you moved recently, especially within your district, you want to make sure that that is up to date and correct. Um, Lastly, the candidate guide has some great information for you to review. Aside from the candidate filing methods and all the other content we covered today, it includes a primer on ranked choice voting education. You want to make sure that you're also informed on ranked choice voting and how it works as you are talking to voters. Includes also a candidate checklist. It's a good sort of checklist of all the steps that you should complete as you are preparing to run for office. Also has information on how to reach other elections offices like the county, the Secretary of State, the Small Donor Elections Program, as well as many other links to different forms, deadlines, and important dates. Next slide. So again, filing starts next week, June 3rd. And we also recommend that you look at the election calendar that's in that candidate guide for important dates. Know your district boundaries, two options to file. Again, that fee waiver or paying the fee and that signature collection option. And then do everything early. We want to make sure that we are available to support you and all the questions that you may have along the way. So don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we're here to serve you along the campaign trail. Next slide. These next few slides to close us out include resources. Most of these have been already linked in the chat, but again, for quick reference, this is specific to Portland City elections. We have the candidate guide, the campaign finance guide, our website that has all of the information that we covered today, and our email that you can reach out to us directly at. Next slide. These are non-Portland City elections resources, looking up the voter districts, the different websites for the voters pamphlet, depending on the county that you're looking to file in, Secretary of State office, and the Small Donor Elections website. Next slide. Okay, so this concludes the training portion of our session today. We will now stop the recording here and move into the question and answer time. So I'll pass it back to James.
Yeah, thank you so much, Blanca.